Thanks for joining us.
Talkline Network Radio, America's longest-running Jewish broadcast network, the voice of the Jewish community.
Welcome to the podcast. You are now tuned in to this episode of our podcast. Today, we are going to interview some of the greatest and most influential minds in our field. And now, please welcome your host.
You're listening to Talkline with Zev Brenner, America's premier Jewish broadcast on the air since 1981.
Welcome back to the program. I'm Zev Brenner. You know, we live in very troubling times, and a lot of Jews are supportive of Israel, but there's a lot more that we could be doing and should be doing. Our guest is Irit Tratt, independent writer, resides in New York. She's a national board member of the Republican Jewish Coalition, the RJC, also serves on the board of fellows at the Jerusalem Center for Public Affairs. And you can find her writings in Newsmax, Jerusalem Post, Algemeiner, JNS, American Spectator, and the Washington Times. Welcome to the program. Thank you for joining us.
Thanks for having me.
You know, I've been following some of your articles recently, and I was most fascinated by one that you wrote in the Algemeiner Journal dealing with what American Jews should be doing. And you had a statistic there that blew my mind that showed that 38% of young Jews under 40 believe Israel's an apartheid state. I can't believe it.
That was shocking. It was a poll taken by the Jewish Electoral Institute, and 38%. I don't know if it's social media or these college campuses, but it's definitely a shocking number. I think after October 7th, there's a silver lining to this horrible evil that unfolded in Israel. It's that you may not change the minds of the BDS supporters and those outspoken against Israel, but you may change the minds, and you're seeing more Jews being galvanized and speaking out for Israel. And that's definitely been a change. I saw it. I went to the rally in Washington, D.C. in November, 300,000 strong. There were religious Jews, secular Jews. And you could see, you know, the Orthodox Jewish young students coming up to the secular attendees and asking them to put on tefillin. I've heard stories of young boys deciding to put on kippot when they go to public school. And this has been, there's a Jewish reawakening that's happening.
I'm smiling because I remember a story Rabbi Ron Eisman of Passaic, New Jersey, told me. He went to the rally and he saw this fellow now wearing a kippah, I think with tattoos. I don't remember if he had earrings. Certainly not your typical Orthodox-looking individual. He wasn't. And he starts talking to the man. And he just finds out that this man, the bus company, discriminated against him, coming from somewhere in New York. And he spent hours and maneuvering to get to the rally just to be there. So he says, I want to give you a hug. He goes, you want to give me a hug? Rabbi says, but I don't really do. The gentleman says, well, you know, no, excuse me. The gentleman said to Rabbi Eisman, can you give me a hug? And Rabbi Eisman said, well, I really don't do hugs. What's going on? He goes, listen, Rabbi Eisman said to him, you went for this hours, so many hours. I have to give you a hug. And he said, I'll give you a hug, he told Rabbi Eisman, on one condition, that you bless me that I should marry or meet a Jewish girl. So Rabbi Eisman gave him a hug, and he said, bless me, should meet a Jewish girl. And then after the rally, he gets an email from the fellow saying that he met a Jewish girl at the rally.
I was going to say, maybe he'll meet.
But that's a big story, and I messed up a little because it was a months ago when I had it, but it's a great story where there you feel this fellowship among Jews of all different backgrounds. You see that in Israel, you see it over here, but yet among the younger generation, and you see the Jewish voice for peace, which is not so Jewish. They're wearing talesim, they're wearing yarmulkes. I don't think they wear it till they go to shul. I don't think they even go to shul. They only wear it for the anti-Israel rallies. But you see a vocal amount of young Jews that are anti-Israel. Amazing. I'm not sure what we can do about that. They're uneducated, I'm sure.
They're uneducated. I think it starts at the home. You know, you need some more education at the home, Jewish day school, Jewish summer camps. But I think an important element of this is traveling to Israel and visiting Israel. And, you know, like everything fades. So this Jewish revival, in order for it to be sustained, young Jews need to travel to Israel. And you see these, and it doesn't need to be on Orthodox, this is not a religious issue necessarily. It doesn't need to be on Orthodox programs. Birthright Israel, lives have been changed just by going on Birthright. There's a major pro-Israel influencers. I think Jordan Tilchen speaks about this a lot, how Birthright changed her life. She now made Aliyah. She's very young. So I think traveling to Israel is the biggest way to blunt this erosion of support among younger Jewish Americans. And there are a lot of programs out there. And also, instead of families choosing to go to Europe on their next vacation, I think choosing to go to Israel is important during this time. I saw another shocking statistic was that last year, I think only a quarter, this was pre-October 7th, only a quarter of foreign visitors to Israel were Jewish. And that actually is slightly higher than previous years when it's only been 22%. That to me is a disappointing number, and maybe is one reason why many young Jews don't feel this connection to Israel.
But I think probably is the education. If you went to a day school, you went to yeshiva, even if it's Salman Schechter or Reform Jewish school, you have more of a chance of having some Jewish continuity and Jewish identity with Israel. A lot of these children, a lot of these students, I remember a survey done, and I read about it in the Long Island Jewish World about 5-6 years ago, saying that a lot of young Jews don't feel connected to Israel, except when there's some sort of emergency. So they're going through life where Israel is not part of their life. Not part of their lifestyle, not part of their language. They're not growing up with the Israel of 1967, 1948. They're growing up with the media which attacks Israel for being an apartheid state, could discriminate against the Palestinians. They don't know what's going on. They think the river to the sea. Which river, what sea? They have no idea.
Right. They have no idea. You're exactly right. It is complacency. I think we've been lulled into this complacency. Israel's there. Congress is overwhelmingly pro-Israel. We don't really have anything to worry about. October 7th was a wake-up call. I think the sizable rallies we've been seeing in major American cities is also a wake-up call. Washington, D.C. had 300,000 people coming out marching against Israel. That would have been unthinkable just 2 decades ago. And in New York City, they're blocking highways. This is a scary time for Jewish Americans, regardless of party affiliation or what religious stream of Judaism you belong to.
No, absolutely. And you see the anti-Semitism on campus, which in a certain way, Jews who are on the fence may move to be more involved when they see how they're discriminated against. Listen, the left, the progressives that you would think would be supporting the underdog, they're supporting those that are the victims, especially of sexual crimes. There is nobody to be spoken to. They're all supporting Hamas and saying it's justified, or they're not speaking out and say it never happened. So it has to be a wake-up call for some young Jews saying that these people who they're allied with are not supportive of them when it's been our people who've been massacred, raped, and brutally assaulted.
Mm-hmm. Right. Jewish liberals, they feel abandoned by what they thought were their ideological allies who are not speaking out for them, especially the feminist movement. Where have they been on speaking out of the horrifying crimes that were committed against Jewish women? They're silent. And that's, I think, for a lot of liberal women has been a shock.
Now, I know you mentioned about birthright and you mentioned about young Jews who go to Israel. There's another problem that's happening on campus, and that is that young evangelical Christians are not supporting Israel the same way their parents did. They support more the Palestinians. It's a growing trend. So I asked one of the pastors, why is that the case? Because usually, even now, who are the biggest supporters of Israel aside from Jews? Evangelical Christian community. Why is that the case? So I was told that they go to these woke colleges, and the same way the Jewish kids are being brainwashed, Christian kids are being brainwashed to be anti-Israel. So there's another problem that we're having in the evangelical Christian, that the next generation are not really pro-Israel.
That's right. Christian kids are not immune to this ideological creep either. And I think part of it, you mentioned the campuses, I think part of it too, the churches have changed, just like synagogues have become more politicized. A lot of reform and conservative synagogues are scared to speak out for Israel. They've become these social justice institutions. Prior to October 7th, they were talking a lot more about racism and other social issues, and ignoring more of the particularist subjects pertaining to Judaism. I think that's true for churches too. You see the growth of mega churches, with rock music and pastors, who may not be focused on the literature and the texts, like pastors who came before them. I tell my college-bound daughter, please, look for your Christian allies on that college campus, because they're often the first ones to come to the defense of Jewish students. You see Kufi tables, Christians United for Israel. They're on campus greens advocating for Israel. So it's definitely something to watch out for. But they do still make up the majority of foreign tourists to Israel.
No, they are. They're strong supporters. I'm just concerned the new generation is shifting. It doesn't happen overnight, happens slowly. But I spoke to enough pastors and ministers who told me that they're concerned about the lack of, appreciation of Israel, the pro-Palestinian bent of a lot of young people, and something which we have to be aware of and try to work with the Christian community.
Right. I mean, we need to, and I've been saying this for years, we need to be paying more attention to the Christian community, cultivating that relationship between our two communities. I think, Ron Dermer got some heat for saying that they're the bedrock of U.S. support for Israel. But it's the truth, both from a demographic standpoint. They make up more of the U.S. population than Jewish Americans do. So we need to be nurturing that alliance. And I think there are some organizations. The Philos Project is partnering with Yeshiva University on a master's program. And there's a lot of academic collaboration going on. There was Hillsdale College, Larry Arnn, also outspoken advocate for Israel and for the Jewish people. So we've got to just strengthen those institutions and realize we do have friends. There needs to be more cooperation between our two communities.
No, absolutely. So, and I went about 25 years ago with Ed McAteer. Christians and Jews went to Israel. I tell you, they were so enthusiastic about Israel and how they were at the Kotel and how they were shaking. And it just was wonderful to watch their enthusiasm, their love for Israel. And that's something which I think a lot of young American Jews can learn from them, is how they feel so passionately about Israel.
Absolutely. I mean, when I bump into Christian tourists at the airport on their way to Israel with their churches, I always thank them. And they're so excited to go to Israel. You could just feel the excitement in their voices. And it's important. I always thank them when I see them, because I love their enthusiasm. But listen, the Christian students are attending the same universities Jewish students are attending. They're taking those same classes. So we need to watch out for dissipating support, for sure.
So here's my question for you, Irit. Should a Jewish student, and I know you have children too, should they be going to a Jewish college where they won't face the anti-Semitism, or should they go to these secular colleges like Harvard, Yale, Barnard, where they face discrimination, anti-Semitism? I have a daughter in Barnard who says she's sitting in the classroom and the person sitting next to her is somebody who was in the rally hours before shouting death to the Jews and attacking Israel.
So I can make arguments for both. And I think Alan Dershowitz on your program mentioned this. If you're a Jewish student who grew up in a strong Zionist home with strong Jewish values, and you're rooted in your Judaism, and you go to one of these secular universities, I don't believe that you are going to be swayed to the other side. If you're going to go on and be a strong advocate for the Jewish people, one of these campuses, I can make the argument that you should be going there instead of abandoning these institutions. And then what's left? Then there aren't going to be any pro-Israel advocates on these campuses. But I can also see what parent, at the end of the day, wants to pay these hefty tuition dollars to these universities who are brainwashing our students and teaching them exactly the opposite of what they've been raised with.
And not responsive to Jewish kids' safety.
Absolutely. And the safety. I don't know if I would send a child today to Columbia, let's say. I mean, that place is particularly bad. I know students who are there who have hired personal security, private security, to walk them across campuses late at night. Yeah. Because they're visibly Jewish and they have sports practice, and they need to make their way from the practice to their dorm. So you hear these stories. So Columbia is particularly bad. But look, Yeshiva University, Stern College for Women, fantastic schools. And I think Jewish parents need to take a look at some other schools. University of Florida, Ben Sass, their president, he was one of the first to come out with a statement post October 7th with such moral clarity. They want Jewish students, and these are safe campuses. They're great schools. So I think Jewish parents should start looking at other institutions too that normally maybe we wouldn't have considered several years ago.
Some of these schools like Columbia, Barnard, NYU, they're looking to minimize and have less Jewish students come. That's why they want to pick people from, they don't say that we want to discriminate. They want to pick people more culturally diverse from around the country. So in which case they would dilute to New York, which would mean more less Jews. That's happening in the last couple of years.
Right. Yeah. You definitely see less Jews on these campuses. Penn in particular, years ago when I was younger, I mean, that I think you could have 100 Jewish students gather Friday night for dinner. Now I think they're even having trouble getting, over Shabbos, a lot of kids to come for lunch. So you see these campuses being diluted of Jewish students for sure.
Our guest is Irit Tratt, independent writer. She lives in New York, national board member of the Republican Jewish Coalition, also serves on the board of fellows at the Jerusalem Center for Public Affairs. You can read her in Newsmax, Jerusalem Post, Algemeiner, JNS, American Spectator, and the Washington Times. I want you to put on your Republican Jewish Coalition hat right now, Irit. And what's interesting is that if you want to see the disparity among American Jews, you look at past elections and what I'm going to predict will probably happen in the upcoming November presidential election. And that has to do with who they're going to vote for. For the most part, the majority of Orthodox Jews vote Republican. Will probably vote for Donald Trump. Majority of non-Orthodox Jews are more Democratic, and no matter who's running, will vote Democratic. It's hard I don't see any change in that shift. It's been this way for a long time. How are you looking to reach out to more Jews? It's nice to see a more parity. I like to see 40-50% on both parties, and this way we can have more of a sway.
Right. So I think Democrats, their lurch to the left has partly happened because Jewish Americans have been voting for them regardless, of their ebbing support for Israel. But I think in a post-October 7th environment with a spike in anti-Semitism, Jewish Americans are going to be prioritizing Jewish interests. And I think we are going to see a shift to the Republican Party. We saw it in Florida last election. I think Trump managed to garner 40%. I'd like to see that number nationally. So I would expect Trump to get between 40 and 50% nationally, given our current climate.
You think he'll get 40% of the Jewish vote?
40% of the Jewish vote?
Yeah.
I do. Mm-hmm. I do.
I think Ronald Reagan, what did he get? About 30-some% when he ran. He was very popular. I think he was the first one to really break the barrier as far as getting more Jewish votes than traditional candidates.
Right. He was. And I think Donald Trump, I think it also a lot could depend on who his VP pick is. People are looking and waiting to see who that will be. I know.
Are you considering to be nominated for that position?
No, I love Elise Stefanik. There's a deep bench of talent on the Republican side for vice presidents. We don't lack for people, for sure. But I think Elise Stefanik really was put on the map. Talk about in suburban enclaves like here in Westchester, among suburban liberal women. I could even tell they loved Elise Stefanik, what she did during those hearings against anti-Semitism, campus anti-Semitism with the 3 university presidents. She'd be a terrific pick. I think a lot of people connected with her during that time. Another name that's being floated is Ron DeSantis. He also dropped out fairly early in the race, endorsed Donald Trump. Politics is a funny business. I could see them making up, and DeSantis coming on as his running mate as well.
I'm not sure. I'm not sure if that would be the case. But anyway, what happened with DeSantis is he really deflated. He started off strong. He was the big hope of the Republican Party, those that didn't want to see Donald Trump, and he just petered out.
I think he joined also a little too late. He waited quite a bit to get.
We had momentum in the beginning, and then he just lost his momentum and kept going downhill. And that maybe have to do with the fact that, listen, Donald Trump, whether you like him or not, he's charismatic. He's entertaining. You watch him perform. But DeSantis doesn't have the same charisma, doesn't have the same magnetism, and I think that hurt him along the campaign trail.
I know it did hurt him. And I often wonder, people put a lot of stock into charisma and being personable, but at the end of the day, it's really policies that matter. Obama, I'm sure, was a great guy to go out and have a beer with, but his policies were terrible for our community.
But
So
because he was charismatic and good in campaign, he was a terrific campaigner. And
excellent.
and if Michelle Obama runs, which many people believe, and I would probably tend to bet that might be the Democratic candidate at the Democratic convention, that you'll have her as being they'll replace Joe Biden with Michelle Obama. There's some talk about it. I think there's a lot of credence to it.
I've heard that too. I just can't believe. I guess there are a lot of people out there who really like her, but I just don't know what she brings to the table other than the Obama name. And maybe people feel they're getting him. If she runs, I've been really disappointed. I know this has been brought up fairly regularly. She hasn't said anything. She's expressed sympathy with the victims of the Hamas attacks, but she has not come out and condemned Hamas in the aftermath of the October 7th attacks. She expressed some sympathy with the Jewish women who were raped and murdered and tortured. But beyond that, she really has not come out against Hamas.
No, she hasn't, but she could be a formidable candidate. Roger Stone says she could be a really real problem for Donald Trump.
I don't know. So I don't see her as such a likable candidate, but I guess a lot of people in America seem to like her and would back her.
Certainly the case. Now, in the remaining moments that we have, one of the problems that we see is we have some progressive Democrats that are so anti-Israel. I think in your area, Representative Jamal Bowman is such an individual who's viciously anti-Israel. And for some reason, I'm not sure why, the Jewish community is not able to muster and back candidates who could really put them out of office. Not just him, but other members of the squad. There's big talk, well, we got to do something about it. Why can't we mobilize and back a candidate who has credibility that could really take on these candidates and beat them?
Well, part of the problem is that I think we're inclined to always give these candidates the benefit of the doubt when they start running for office. Bowman in 2020, he defeated Elliot Engel in the primary, and that was a major upset. We didn't see that coming. The Jewish community did not see that one coming, and he cruised.
He didn't see it coming. By the way, I know Congressman Elliot Engel. He didn't have his heart in the race. He didn't run a campaign. He was lackluster. He didn't show up. He didn't really campaign. He knew that he felt he was going to lose, and he didn't put any effort. So, and I spoke to him a couple of times, and it was pretty obvious that he wasn't really planning on winning.
Right. Well, up until the last couple of weeks in the community, then the Jewish community didn't mobilize and advocate for him either. I mean, they supported him, but again, Jamal Bowman, the level of vitriol we see from him today, we didn't see when he was running for office in 2020. I think he came out with a statement saying that the U.S. should condition military aid to Israel. So he was critical of Israel, but no one thought that he would become the leading anti-Israel advocate in Congress alongside Ilhan Omar and Rashida Tlaib. And I think Jewish Americans have to realize it's very hard to unseat an incumbent candidate from an urban district. I think right now he's facing his most formidable challenge yet with George Latimer, who's 70 years old, hasn't lost his election in 30 years, and he's raised almost $1.5 million, over 70% of which has come from inside the district, which the opposite is the case for Jamal Bowman. I think the majority of his money right now raised is coming from probably these big progressive groups. They're not coming from his constituents inside the Bronx or Westchester County. So I think this is going to be a very close race.
I hope so. But here's the problem in New York is that the Republican Party is not as well organized in New York. Long Island is different. I think Long Island is better organized. It'll be interesting to see what happens in the race between Tom Suozzi and Mazi Phillip. Mm-hmm. But in the rest of the state, the Republican Party is not as well organized. They don't really field such great candidates. Look at what happened in New York City. We had lots of races they could have won had they had a better candidate. I'm not sure how much resources and what they're putting into to defeat Jamal Bowman.
Right. Well, the Republican Party, I don't think, Democrats outnumber Republicans in the 16th congressional district by 4-1. George Latimer is running against Jamal Bowman in the Democratic primary. So he's raising a lot of money. AIPAC also is helping in this race. But I think Republicans saw some great gains in the state with Michael Lawler and Anthony Desposito and Mark Molinaro. We have wonderful, young, decent, principled, conservative, centrist politicians, I think, in this state. Whether, there's a big push now in the 16th congressional district to have Republicans change their party affiliation for a period of time in order to go to the primary and vote for George Latimer. So that's really been the narrative right now.
Is that happening? Are the Republicans re-registering as Democrats?
There are plenty of them who are doing that. Whether it's going to reach that critical mass that you need to unseat Bowman, I don't know. He has a lot of support in the Bronx. That's a densely populated area, but I think there will be several thousand people in Westchester who are changing their party affiliation.
Because it would seem to me, and I studied a lot of these races, it's a very small number of that differentiates the winner from the loser, and whoever's able to mobilize their base. And I think just getting a few more thousand Jews committed to voting could make a big difference in a lot of these races. But for some reason, we find any excuse not to vote. We're busy. We're going to vacation. You name the excuse, and you look at the numbers. I think if we're able to, and I'm big into that. First, I'm big into voter registration. I think there isn't enough Jews that are registered to vote. The numbers show that a lot of young Jews are not registered. And you have the older ones that go to Florida, that are the snowbirds, they don't re-register wherever they go to Florida, so they don't vote. But I think in local elections, if we're able to get the high schools and make sure that every child, every student, when they turn 18, has a voter registration form to fill out, don't say which party, let them pick whatever party they want. I'd love to see more of a concerted effort to push voter registration, and Jews should be involved in voting more than we are right now.
I agree. I mean, I would think that Jews vote at a higher percentage than the general population.
They might, but it's still very small compared to what our numbers are.
Absolutely. It's still very small, but you see Teach NYS has been, I know when I pick up my son from carpool, they've been there making sure people are registered. So there's a big push right now in the district. And I think the Jewish community here is more mobilized than ever to start getting involved in politics, pay attention to policy. Especially we had an incident couple weeks ago where graffiti was genocide supporters was graffitied across the kosher ice cream shop, down the street, across the clothing store window. 4 p.m. the same day, there was a rally in that parking lot. George Latimer came to show his support for the Jewish community. So he I think is getting a great deal of backing from this area.
I hope so, because listen, send a message. If you get rid of one of them, I think the other ones might be concerned, because AOC, I'm not sure why she can't be unseated, and some of the other ones also, Ilan, Talib and others that are out there, they should send a strong message. You want to be anti-Israel? We're going to mobilize against you. And
right.
I'd love to see a much more conservative. I know they've tried, but yes, it is difficult to unseat an incumbent, but it's not impossible. And if we're organized, I believe it could be done.
And it can be. Well, look, Summer Lee and Ilhan Omar also have primary challenges as well. So those are two other races to watch out for.
Irit, when are you running for office?
Never. Very happy not being a politician.
What's your next article going to be about?
I think about the feminist movement abandoning these Israeli Jewish women post-October 7th. The silence has just been so upsetting. From the Me Too movement to celebrities, just shocking.
Even though I have to say, while I'm shocked by those that didn't support Israel, but those that did, like Hillary Clinton, Al Sharpton, it was nice to see people you wouldn't necessarily expect to be such strong vocal supporters of Israel that have done so during this time. So that's a little more heartening than those that did the usual anti-Israel rhetoric and were pretty vicious about it and supporting Hamas. I'm not sure anybody can support Hamas and claim that there were no victims on October 7th.
I completely agree. I completely agree. And again, there have been celebrities who have gone to Israel, Montana Tucker, Deborah Messing, Michael Rappaport, Jerry Seinfeld. And that's just been wonderful to watch too. So we need to remember that.
Irit Tratt, independent writer from New York City, she's on the board of the Republican Jewish Coalition. You can read her in Jerusalem Post and Algemeiner, JNS, and other publications. Thank you for joining us. Look forward to having you back again.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
Thank you for tuning in to
Talkline with Zev Brenner, America's premier Jewish broadcast, the pulse beat of the Jewish community.
For continuous Jewish programs, talklinenetwork.com, or our 24-hour-a-day listen line at 641-741-0389. For past shows, you can find us on iTunes, Spotify, Amazon, YouTube, Instagram, and all major podcast platforms, or jewishpodcast.org. Thanks for listening to the talklinenetwork.com.
Follow us on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram.
Terrific. Did a great job.